What's up, everybody? Long time no talk, at least from the guy next to me. You heard from me yesterday going over some news and notes and everything. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran, and we are here to talk some Bengals football with all of you as the preseason is starting its descent, I guess, into the background, whatever you want to call it. But it is going further and further in the rear view as the regular season is starting to become upon us. John, happy Wednesday to you, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, man. I guess we're rivals today because the Reds are playing the Angels. So, like,
I wore my Angels hat, and I'm like, that's just not going to appease the audience. That's not going to appease the audience.
But the Reds, the Reds are playing Shohei, who's the GOAT right now. FC Cincinnati is about to play Lionel Messi, who is the GOAT, and the Bengals are about to play Sam Howell.
Yeah, Sam Howell
doesn't. Yeah, it's the same.
He's getting some hype. Let's not doubt. And hey, those pesky Commanders absolutely ruined the Baltimore Ravens' perfect preseason over the last, God, I don't know what, 7 seasons.
I think it's 8 years. Yeah.
God, give me a break. I said it yesterday, and there's a clip from John Harbaugh, and I guess he did put some of us who do this for a living, for fun, for all of it, put us in our places a little bit, kind of knocking away the notion that these things are, these games are pointless or meaningless or that sort of thing. And he's, he kind of went rah coach on everybody, but he did have a good point on that. But still, it's a preseason freaking winning streak, dude. Come on.
He's kind of entered his grandpa phase. I remember him being really pissy towards the sideline reporter during the playoff game against the Bengals. I feel like he's just, I don't know, he's just been around long enough where he's just, I can act however I want. I got essentially tenure here with the Ravens, which is how Marvin Lewis was with the Bengals. So
yeah, that's a good parallel. Yeah, it's just the get off my lawn guy, right?
Yeah,
kind of,
So I can do without him. I'm good.
Well, okay. Well, we'll move on. But we've got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about this last final game. We're going to talk about some bubble guys. Kind of some things developing with the final roster. A big week ahead for a lot of players. So we'll talk about some guys that need to have big weeks or need to show some big strides or something. They got to show something if they're going to be making a final roster push. And then, of course, we're going to talk about some of the positives we're seeing out of camp, particularly from some of the guys who have been coming back from injury and showing some nice progress. And then we've got some bad news that we're going to talk about and, I guess, give some analysis and our opinions on it, reactions on it. But I still think there is a light at the end of the tunnel with that particular piece of news, but we'll get to that later as well. And, of course, if you are new here, welcome. We love new subscribers. We love new viewers. Appreciate you tuning in. You can get this show on a number of different platforms. We do stream live across a lot of different platforms, whether it's Twitter /X, whatever the hell you call it now. And then, of course, YouTube, our channel. You can subscribe to that. The icon is underneath John by that Cincy Jungle logo that you see down there. Click that to subscribe. Click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And, of course, give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing on the channel there. And if you like the audio side of things, you can get the show on your favorite audio streamer, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major ones. We are there. And we'll be bringing you all kinds of different stuff into the regular season, through the regular season. We're going to do, peeks over the fence with previews with a lot of different people that cover the Bengals oppositions. We're going to do listener questions. We're going to have special guests, all kinds of different stuff. So you're gonna want to have to subscribe to our YouTube channel or subscribe to the audio side, however you like it. But all right, big week ahead, John, and it kind of seems counterintuitive a little bit because, I mean, we just talked about Harbaugh and how his stance is about preseason, and here we are saying, well, it's week 3, and so I guess first of all, let's start here. Do you think that starters will get any reps, or is this all backups and guys? What do you see? That because I as I relayed yesterday, Tomlin said he's going to play some of his starters. He didn't commit to how long or anything like that, but if they're going to, aside from your Patrick Petersons and stuff like that, he said some of his starters are going to play. He wants to see some stuff out of them. I don't know if that's going to be the same kind of mindset in Cincinnati.
No. Starters played last week. You'll have McPherson, Robbins, Adamitis as their specialists out there because that's all they got aside from Drew Chrisman at punter and holder. No offensive and defense starters will play, nor should they on the worst field in the history of football at FedEx Field, which sucks.
That's a great point.
Yeah, which sucks for the guys who do have to play. But to Harbaugh's point, we don't have to keep going back to him, but this week, preseason in general is really big for the 40-ish guys who are all fighting for their NFL lives right now. And this is ultimately the biggest week of the year for that tier class of players. You'll have close to 1,500, 1,600 players who are going to be out of a job looking to get claimed and picked up and signed to practice squads. And this is their last chance to really make a mark on the team that they're currently playing for. When you're talking about the Bengals, like the roster, it's not completely set. There's still about a handful of positions that I think are truly up for grabs right now. And for those however many players who are competing for those spots, like this is the last chance, really. Like practice probably means more to the coaching staff because it's a controlled environment. It's doing the things that they want to see, but in-game experience and what you put on tape, it also matters a lot too. And when the lights are on, and it's basically the closest thing that you can get to an actual game, that has a lot of weight to it, obviously, as well. So we see this every year. There's a handful of guys who kind of have good training camps, good preseasons, and then it all leads up to how they look in the final game because it's basically the backup Super Bowl. So, yeah, I'm excited.
The backup Super Bowl, that's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, so again, it is what it is. I thought you made a great point, though, with the field and the conditions there. Obviously, the Bengals have some – and a lot of teams have some really bad memories on that particular field. So, yeah, I mean, I would understand why they would be hesitant to play, some of the top depth chart guys. But, I mean, this is just kind of an overarching topic here. I mean, it's a big week you mentioned it, for the guys on the bubble, right? And there are some out here, and we can name, a lot of the bubble guys, and we'll talk about who needs to kind of separate from the pack in their respective position groups as well. So, for me, I mean, you look at some players here. The tight end position has a couple that you could point to, right? I mean, there's some back end wide receiver guys. What are the Bengals going to do at wide receiver? And I mean, they've got, you got Lassiter in there, who I thought played really well. I think it was the first week. He's had a couple nice performances out there. They love Stanley Morgan, man. I mean, they just love him. And so where does he fit in with the two new wide receivers that they also love? Charlie Jones, a little bit better this week as opposed to week 1. I mean, they're not going to give up on him, but obviously he's got the shoulder situation going on, backup running back. And then, of course, on the offensive line, Cody Ford, Hakeem Adeniji, some of these guys who are veteran guys, Deontay Smith. I mean, those are some of the usual suspects. Who else am I missing here for guys on the bubble?
For those positions specifically, that makes it's going to be like 6 or 7 receivers, and it's just about if Stanley Morgan is going to go to the practice squad and get elevated to be a specialist, or if he's just going to stay on the team and be active. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't have 7 at this point, just because I don't think anything has changed with the dynamic with Stanley Morgan. So long as Charlie Jones has been out there, he's fielded punts, he's gotten experience, that's really all that he's had to do in order to knock Trent Taylor off the team. Do you care about how much depth that you have at punt returner if it's between Jones and Taylor for that job? Obviously Jones isn't getting cut, like you said. Is Taylor just going to stick around just for that role, just because he has more experience as a receiver, just more experience in general? I don't know. Like, you don't keep 8 receivers, so then you would have to cut Morgan. I don't think they want to cut Morgan. So, like, these seem like very complex problems in our head, but it usually ends up being more simple than we end up thinking. And then at tight end, Tanner Hudson had momentum, and then he got concussed, and he hasn't practiced a ton. He didn't play last weekend against Atlanta, so it seems like his momentum kind of died down, and he would be an easy guy to kind of retain on the practice squad anyways. And then you bring back Mitchell Wilcox from the pup list, and he's immediately practicing. He's immediately with either the ones or the twos, so you have to think that he's going to be on the team and kind of retain that same role that he had last year. Where's the third tight end? Is he on the team right now? Is he Drew Sample? Is he Tanner Hudson? I don't know. I don't even think the Bengals know at this point, despite them, having not a soft spot, but they have an appreciation for what Drew Sample is. What that is, I don't know. I still don't know after 5 years now, but no, it's just what it is, right?
It's the Ryan Hewitt. I don't want to call it a disease, but it's the Ryan Hewitt situation, right? Are you an H-back? Are you a tight end? I mean, they like him. It's just, where's your spot? What's your defined role? And I think that's where they're struggling a little bit with a guy like Sample, both ironically Pac-12 guys, but Hewitt was always Big Ten now, yeah. I don't know. It just reminds me of that situation all over again. They're struggling to find a defined role for Drew Sample, I guess. But I mean, he seems to be kind of lining up in some of that fullback stuff and then doing a little bit of the tight end stuff as well. How effective is that going to be when the true games happen? I couldn't tell you.
Well, I mean, how much are they actually going to use that at that point? They're still an 11 personnel team. They will have maybe 20, 15 snaps to give to other tight ends. And again, like Wilcox is probably tight end number 2 at this point. So yeah, 3 tight ends are going to make the team just for the sake of depth. And you don't really want to go in with just 2 tight ends anyways. But that third tight end is either going to be inactive or he's just going to play special teams. I guess Drew Sample can do that. Like, again, I don't exactly know what they want behind those 2 guys. It might just end up being Sample if they can't find a guy on the waiver wire. But yeah, it seems like he's going to stick around. Another guy, though, that was mentioned in the comment section by W. Lewis, Trevion Williams is extremely interesting to me because I think entering camp, he was the lead favorite to be the next Samaje Perine, and then he got hurt with an ankle sprain, and he hasn't really practiced that much since. I think he's back like in pads, but not like fully reintegrated back into practice yet. So I don't know if he's going to play this week. I don't know if he's fully returned to practice yet. I don't think he's getting cut just because there was clearly a plan to have him, if not be what Samaje Perine was in its entirety last year, but to have a pretty significant role in filling those shoes alongside like a Chase Brown or Chris Evans. So I don't think they're going to cut him just because he's injured, but I do wonder what the dynamic is with that room now, because now it does seem like 4 running backs are going to make the team. And again, for a team that's going to have 7 wide receivers, that's a lot of skill position players.
It's a lot of skill position players. And then you've got to really maximize your roster spots on the offensive line because you've got a lot of swing guys. You've got a lot of guys that they're trying to get or have proven to have positional versatility, right? I mean, they're playing, they gave Sharping center snaps and he's played guard. He's kind of been all over the place. And then Ford, we talked about him, guard, tackle in the NFL, all that kind of stuff to varying degrees of success or lack thereof. So they're going to need to, maximize their roster spots this week or on the offensive line, rather, when final cuts happen and everything. So a lot of tough decisions to be made. And John, I think you'd be in agreement with this, but I don't know. We haven't really talked about this too much, but I would venture to guess that the final 53 that they come out with a little bit, a handful of days or whatever down the road is not going to be necessarily what the final 53 is when week 1 hits, because Zach Taylor has proven and his staff has proven that they like to scour the waiver wire. Now they're going to be back in the order, but they like to get guys from final cuts. I mean, Perine, you mentioned his name. He was a guy that they got right before the start of the 2019 season. And I remember when I went to the Seattle game, I was seeing him on kick coverage. You go down Aussie last year. I mean, you go down the line. They've brought in players often after final cuts. So what we see, and we can talk about, roster guys and bubble guys and all that kind of stuff, and we will continue to. But I mean, there may be one, two, or maybe even 3 guys that make it through final cuts, and then, oh, by the way, here's a waiver wire pickup. Sorry.
Yeah, that happens every year. It happens with every team too. Like that first initial 53, it's just it has to be submitted by that time, and it's never going to be the final plan. It depends on who's injured, who's going to be available, the whole 9 yards, right? Lyle Collins is going to be an interesting case to watch. I don't know if they're going to keep him on the PUP. It seems like he's most likely just going to be kept there, but he has to make the actual team in order to be carried over to the active PUP. So he's going to make the team. That means there's going to be like 10 offensive linemen at minimum, probably on the initial 53, which means someone who they want to make the team is not going to be on the team in the initial 53. And then they're going to have to put Collins back on the PUP and then re-sign the guy that they cut. That could be literally any one of these any of these vested veterans or guys who they don't think are going to get claimed off the wire. I don't know who that is yet, but that's probably going to happen. And then you have guys who are going to make the team. Like Drew Sample could be this case. He could make the initial 53, and then they could learn that there's a tight end who got waived by another team, and then they would release Sample in order to make room for this tight end. So, yeah, it sucks for a lot of these guys who either think that they made the team and they realize their dream, and then they get immediately crushed because of a corresponding move, or guys who experience initial heartbreak by not making the team, but then they're brought back for just essentially like for rules purposes, essentially.
Yeah. Well, let's transition this a little bit into who is needing to separate themselves this week, as we are going to see a lot of backups, a lot of back end depth chart guys. So, I mean, I'm there are a lot of ways you could go with this. We mentioned the crowded position room, or offensive line group. We mentioned the crowded wide receiver group. Some stuff to sort out at running back. So, I mean, right, all of those, we can talk about a lot of different guys there. But one guy, I just think that, and I think he ends up making it on the final roster. But he had a lot of buzz in the spring and the summer in practices. Had a pretty good first game, I think, and then the second game gave up some completions there. But that's DJ Ivey. I think he needs to really kind of have a moment or two in this game to kind of really say, okay, this guy's done enough to be maybe one of the last corners on the roster. Maybe he already has done enough in the coach's eyes, but I just think it's one of those weeks for him where if he has that one big play, or a couple of big tackles or pass deflections, that sort of thing, really solidify his stance as one of the last corners on the roster.
Yeah, he seems like a case where he would have to play. To me, he would have to play extremely badly to lose cornerback 6 at this point. Primarily because I think he's practiced pretty consistently, and again, that still holds a lot of weight. He's made, like you said, like the first preseason game was really strong. Second preseason game was a little spotty, but he ended it on a high note with a breakup, like right in the last seconds of the game in the end zone, nonetheless. So he's done it in the real situations. He's done it consistently in practice, and he's actually been playing, which, I mean, his main competition has been Sidney Jones, and he's been hurt for the past week. I don't even know if he's going to play in this game. He might have returned to practice. I'm not 100% sure on that. The other competition is it's not there. Like Marvin Tell Jr., he may not make the practice squad. Alan George has not had a good preseason, and they've been using him in the slot too, just to get him reps, right? Just because there's been an influx of talent on the boundary at cornerback. So, yeah, it's Ivy's job to lose, I think, at this point. And again, like, he'll have to just forget how to play cornerback, I think, in order to really give that up. Or maybe I'm misreading the situation entirely, and they want to go with the vet and Sidney Jones just because they have, DJ Turner and Cam Taylor-Britt. They have young guys there. Maybe they don't want to have just a bunch of rookies behind them. But I think Ivy's played good enough and better than Jones in order to take that spot.
Fair enough. Wilcox, you mentioned his name, and like you said, practicing right away. And unfortunately, you mentioned Tanner Hudson, and then, Wilcox kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit because he got into the mix late because of an injury. And so, I mean, he's probably going to need to make some noise. I don't know what they're going to do with him coming back so quickly after practice to practice. I don't know if, he's going to get substantial snaps or what the game plan is with him, but you have to figure again, if they like what they like out of Drew Sample, Obviously, where Smith's your guy, and then you've got, some other guys battling it out, Hudson and, Ossie and all kinds of players there. So that's a guy, Wilcox, I think, and I like him. I like some of the progression that he showed late last year. He may be a guy simply because of his set of circumstances where he may need to, show off a little bit this week.
I think like the difference between Wilcox and Ivy is that like Ivy would be cornerback 6, and he probably won't be active, assuming everyone else is healthy in the position group. Wilcox will be active, and most people, I think when you talk about depth and like, okay, how can this guy like potentially replace the starter? It's not. I don't think that's really where the majority of the conversation is. It's like, okay, what can you provide on the special teams? Because if you're not playing a significant amount of snaps, like you need to contribute on punts and kickoffs, and they know Wilcox is like a known commodity in that regard. So I think just that experience and that relationship and trust that he has with the special teams units with Darren Simmons, I think that's more or less solidified him as one of the 3 like tight ends that are going to make the team initially. It's also like a different case between like him and like Awuzie, because Awuzie was immediately activated off the pup, and they've been slowly progressing him back into practice. And he's just now taking like multiple reps in 11 and 11. So he had an interception today, which is cool. Wilcox gets activated to the pup after a month of rehabbing on the side, and he's immediately back into practice. So like they seem to be more confident in just putting him back into the fire. Like he's ready to go. And that whole, like, I don't know if you read up on like what he talked about with his injury, but like he wasn't even aware that his knee was like screwed up, and he doesn't even know for sure like when he injured it. But when he had his exit physical after the AFC Championship game, he had something wrong with his meniscus, and he had to have surgery on it, which is why his whole free agency and his offseason didn't really go as planned, and why the Bengals waited until like July to even bring him back. So he seems to be completely healthy now, and I don't think the Bengals are holding him back. And again, they know who he is on special teams, which probably gives him an edge in terms of just not having to do a ton to really prove himself this week.
I briefly said it yesterday about how, it was a knee issue, and, it was kind of a surprise. And I think some listeners who were tuning in had said they thought it was a shoulder issue. I'm like, no, it was a knee, I think. So, yeah. But regardless, you're right. It was, I did hear his comments about, or read his comments about how it was kind of a little bit of a shocker for him to have to undergo that. And like you said, it kind of derailed his off season a little bit. But again, he's one of those guys, I think, that Darren Simmons is going to have his say on certain back end roster positions, and who he believes can provide value on his unit. So, and I think that's one of those guys there that can do that. What's your take on defensive line, man? Because that's starting to become a little bit of a crowded situation as well. I think Cam Samples had some nice moments this preseason. Obviously, Myles Murphy didn't play last week, and a little bit of a slow go in the opener there. We know that's going to be kind of a developmental pick in a lot of ways there. Got some flashes from Dominique Davis, a guy who was he in the XFL, right? And then he was with the Bengals last year. Then he went with the XFL, and then they brought him back this year. He's had a couple nice plays as well, particularly in the first game. So crowded room there. I mean, who are you needing to see kind of, hey, pop their head up above some of the others there to make the team?
Yeah, I think 9 guys are pretty much locked at this point. You have 5 defensive ends, the starters, Samples, Sy, Myles Murphy, 4 defensive tackles, Reeder, BJ Hill, Zach Carter, Josh Tupou, who for whatever reason is being like talked as like a guy in the bubble, and I don't think that's even remotely true. Yeah, no. Like it's a matter of like this group is too good, I think, to not go 10. It's a matter of if it's going to be 6 edges or 5 defensive tackles. I'm leaning towards 5 defensive tackles just for the sake of it being even, but also I think there's been 2 guys who are worthy of that spot, but it's been really close, right? Jay Tufele and Dominique Davis both had really good preseason debuts, and then Tufele didn't play so well against Atlanta, but Davis continued to show up. Like he's been really impressive getting after it. I think he's recorded like 6 pressures, and he's been pretty decent in run defense too. Tufele, like we know what he can do in the regular season, which I think definitely holds weight, but he just hasn't, I don't think, has looked as consistent as Davis. But there's also, again, like practice that kind of goes into that equation too. Raymond Johnson III at defensive end has looked phenomenal. He's one of the best pass rushers in the entire preseason this year. But again, he's a sixth edge. He's not going to dress up on game days unless there's injuries. So I think they look at him as like a guy that they definitely want back on the practice squad. Jeff Gunter's in there too, but he hasn't looked as good as Raymond Johnson. So he's probably a practice squad guy too. I'm thinking it's 10, and it's between Tufele and Davis. I wouldn't be shocked if it's either one. I would personally lean Davis just because I think he's played better. I don't think you're going to have an issue retaining Tufele, but vice versa is also true in that sense.
Yeah, and our guy Brian in Iowa here. I mean, everybody knows it's I'm the Tufele guy around here, but he is a quote gamer. That is kind of the thing with him, and you can he's an active player. He's a good good supplemental piece to have. But Dominic Davis has also shown a lot as well, like you said. So a lot of tough decisions there to be made, and looking at offense, I guess really the most crowded spots. I mean, yes, wide receiver, but really a lot of tough decisions to be made on the backup offensive line. The situation there, but they just haven't really. The backup offensive line this preseason hasn't played well, so that's also kind of muddying the waters and who to keep, who not to keep.
Yeah, it's a classic case of it might be three guys who are playing decent, but then there's like one or two guys who are kind of bringing down the whole group, and that changes every week just because these guys aren't consistent enough to put together 3 consecutive good weeks. Like I think Nate Gilliam has played decently at guard and center. I think Deontay Smith has definitely proven that he's progressed as both a right and left tackle. Jackson Carman undoubtedly looks better at left tackle, but even still, like he's like the 3rd or 4th guy at that position. So who knows what the deal is with that? It's like it feels like 8 is the real number, but like 9 with Leal on that initial roster. Deontay Smith, I think, has the inside track for the swing tackle. Max Sharping, I think, has played a little bit better than Trey Hill, so I think he'll probably be that swing interior guy. And then it's a matter of, do you want Trey Hill just because he has experience snapping? Do you want Cody Ford because he just has more experience in general and he's flashed at guard at least a handful of times? Or is it like, I don't think they cut Jackson Carman just because of the financial implications with that, but still, like logistically, he probably won't dress because he can't play more than just one spot on the offensive line. Do you find a trade partner for him? Who the hell's going to trade for him at this point in his career? Like, I don't know. Like, if a Billy Price situation is out there for them to take advantage, I think they wouldn't hesitate in doing so. But it feels like there's 2 guys in Smith and Sharping that have spots locked up, and everything else beyond that is really up for grabs.
Where are you at with the Adeniji?
Yeah, like I don't think he's played bad this preseason, but it's a numbers game, right? You do so much to continue to improve the offensive line that a guy like Adeniji sticks around, but it just becomes so crowded where like you don't know where to fit him, right? Because they probably trust him at both right and left tackle. He's at least played inside at guard, but again, I don't think that they can go 10 if they go 7 receivers and 4 running backs and 3 tight ends. I think like 9 is probably like the number that ends up being what it is when week 1 begins. So I think Adeniji might be number 10 right now, and that kind of sucks. But again, like, I don't think they would have an issue bringing him back on the practice squad.
Who did I miss? Who am I missing here that we didn't talk about yet?
I think Michael Thomas is an interesting conversation at safety, just because we've talked Morgan, we've talked Wilcox. There are definite special team staples on this team. I don't think any of them matter more, at least from the past 2 years, than Michael Thomas. But do you go 5 safeties when you need 6 cornerbacks? When you probably going to keep 10 defensive linemen? Again, like one guy that I don't think they're going to be comfortable with is getting cut, but he's 33. He clearly loves being in Cincinnati. He's a joy to talk to. He's a joy to talk about his teammates. He's clearly loved what Tyson Anderson, Jordan Battle, those guys at safety have done this year. They seem to have enough in that group, and I think Thomas would love coming back on the practice squad. And they have activation spots, and I don't think they would have an issue bringing him up and just being the special teams guy again, because I don't know if they're willing to move on from him in that role, but I think they might not have a choice if they want to keep all these other guys.
That's a good point. I guess one we haven't really talked about, but everybody, well, we haven't talked about it today. We have talked about it before. The backup quarterback. So
Yeah.
I mean, I
Trey
guess
Lance.
right now, um, do yeah, do you? I mean, are you giving the edge to Browning right now? I mean, I think I've seen a little bit more out of him, which is a little bit surprising to me, just given some of the things we've seen over the years from Trevor Siemian. But neither guy is really given you a lot. And I understand, the mix and match game on offense and the offensive line. So I understand there's going to be some growing pains there, but man, it's been a little difficult to watch. And I think I may have misspoke on the last post game report where I said two touchdowns. I might have said two offensive touchdowns, but it's been one offensive touchdown, right? And then the other touchdown, Tyson Anderson. And yeah. So bottom line is the Bengals are just they're not getting into the end zone, and the quarterbacks aren't getting them into the end zone. They're settling for field goals, which has kind of been a problem, really, that the Bengals have experienced, even with their ones in the postseason late in the year. So they need to figure that stuff out. Granted, you never want these backup quarterbacks to play. No offense to either of them or anyone else they bring in. You never want them to play, but you kind of want to feel a little bit better about that situation than you currently do at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a problem for March, April, when you had a chance to sign guys in free agency or the draft who weren't Trevor Siemian. I don't even think Siemian was like a bad signing. Like, he was clearly an experienced veteran who had success in the past and worked with Brian Callahan. But if he doesn't look the part in practice, if he can't sustain drives and can't sustain accuracy, and even the standard that he's established as a backup quarterback, then yeah, it definitely brings an issue, and it brings more of the onus on getting Jake Browning not to speed, but getting him to continue to build off what he did last preseason, because he was pretty good competing with Brandon Allen, and they just went with the more experienced guy, and now it seems like the edge belongs to Browning, who's not a young guy at this point, but compared to Simeon, he's definitely a lot more greener. He hasn't taken a snap in the regular season, and hopefully he won't this year unless it's the very end of the game and they're up by 4 touchdowns. But Browning's played better, and I don't think it's even a matter of like, well, one knows the offense more than the other, because like Browning's been in the offense for 2 years now and Simeon's brand new. So Simeon has gotten up to speed, but like I think Browning has the edge in terms of just being here longer and just playing better. So that's probably the decision, unless they're just desperate to bring Brandon Allen back and are waiting for the 49ers to cut him, which again, if it's between Jake Browning and Brandon Allen, it's September, man. Like, these were problems for months ago. You just got to deal with it.
This is one of those positions I think waiver wire could be in play for, not just because of how these two have played, I guess, but there may be someone out there that just intrigues them enough to go after. And I don't know though. I mean, these last week's game on offense was really tough to watch. That was a real tough game to watch. Just not moving the ball, not scoring points, and just everything. Just kind of a rough game to watch. But those are some of the people who need to separate themselves this week against Washington, as the Bengals have some very tough decisions to make with final cuts around the corner, and then, of course, constructing their final roster as they head into the regular season. And we will be covering that result, not only of the contest, but of the final roster cuts and all that kind of stuff. We'll be covering that here on the program at cincyjungle.com, and of course, where John does his wizardry on the keyboard at A2Zsports.com. Go check out the good work that he does over there as well. Let's transition to a little bit of a tougher topic, and not centered around the preseason game coming up. And that is about Ken Anderson, a guy who is one of the best players in Bengals history, was in the inaugural Ring of Honor. He has been excessively kind to us. I think he's been on this show like 3 times. And every time we ask, he's like, yes, just make this, just make the scheduling work. And great guy. I'm going to play a clip in just a minute here, but your reactions to the news that Ken Anderson yet again just missed out on the Hall of Fame when he with the senior candidates, they whittled it down to 3, excuse me, and he just missed that.
I wasn't terribly surprised, and this is going to sound like a really crude explanation, but the guys who are voting on this are all really old, and they just watched one Bengals player get inducted as a senior finalist, and I think the rationale was, well, we can't have 2 in a row. We got to give these other teams some spotlight, and also from the perspective
that's a horse crap. But honestly, though, like if that's the perspective, plug your ears, kids. That's a horse shit response. Honestly,
I mean, I don't disagree.
Yeah, but I mean, you're probably right in the rationale, but I mean that's just garbage.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like following Ken Riley and his family's plight to get to this point, and the fact that he had it, after his death, like there was one senior finalist who I believe his name is Art, and he passed away 8 years ago. So that family has probably been fighting this battle for even longer than Ken Riley's family. Like they're like the other two, like they played in the 70s. They're both like 70 or 60 years old. Like, I have more sympathy for these guys, and I try to balance that with trying to argue that the Bengals players should have been in. And I don't know. I have more of an understanding for like there's only 3 of these spots, and it's great that these guys get in. But yeah, like I think with Ken Anderson's argument, like it's still clear as day, and he should still get in. But I genuinely believe that they probably thought that 2 years in a row, like we'll make him wait another year.
Yeah, I think I didn't see this until closer to the show when we took the air. But I think you put out that you on Twitter that you believe that next year is going to be the year that Ken gets the nod. And so Art, I believe it's Art Powell is the Vikings from the Vikings is the guy that you're talking about. Look, it's not about the 3 that got in not being deserving, but it's just yet another year of waiting for Ken Anderson to get in. And I still think he gets in. It's just, it's taking so long. I'm going to play a clip in just a second here, but in addition to what you believe is, 2024 is going to be the year maybe that Ken Anderson finally gets his rightful place in Canton there. I know Bengal Jim kind of corroborated that with a tweet saying that he kind of, I guess, either heard some rumblings or kind of gathered some intel of the discussions in that room. And I know that there were a lot of positive conversations, I think is how he worded it, about Ken Anderson and him getting into the Hall of Fame. So it sounds, if we were going to take that, and Jim's well connected. He's done a lot of stuff with Canton and the Hall of Fame and obviously with the team itself. And so I take him at his word. And so for kind of reading into some of these things, you're kind of saying it's not so much now if Ken Anderson gets in, it's more of a when, which is, kind of the light at the end of the tunnel here. I just want to highlight who Ken Anderson is as a guy. We all know he was a fantastic football player. A lot of people know him and have heard him, covering Bengals games. He was a coach for a while on the Bengals. He won a Super Bowl as a coach with the Steelers. And then, if you've watched our show, you've seen what an engaging guy he is. About the Ken Anderson Alliance. This is a clip from the very first time we talked with him, John. And I cringe a little bit because I asked what could have been an uncomfortable question. And this is 3 years ago, if you can believe that. I asked what I look back and I go, I don't know if I like so much that I asked him about it, but he kind of knew we were going in that direction. And it was about him not getting into the Hall of Fame to this point. And watch how he redirects his answer. He could have put people on blast. He could have put the Hall of Fame on blast. And watch what kind of a guy he is here in this clip. It's about 2 minutes as I ask the question and he answers it. I think all of us that follow the NFL, that follow the Cincinnati Bengals, think it's absolutely criminal you are not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame based on your credentials and what you did in the NFL. I guess my question is a little bit two-pronged. How much resentment are you holding based on that snub? Hopefully, and Bengals fans are doing what they can to get the folks at Canton to change that. And do you think just the lack of franchise success, maybe even in an era that you didn't play, the 1990s, is playing into the snubbing of you being enshrined in Canton?
Well, I don't know about snubbing me. I think we've got several other players that deserve to be in. One of them was my great teammate, Kenny Riley, who just passed away. He's fifth on the all-time list in number of interceptions. When you look at quarterback statistics, back in when I played, they weren't as gaudy as they are now, and you kind of get lost in time. But his 65 interceptions is still number 5 all time. In the area that he played in, they didn't throw the football as much. I think, when I look back at the 70s and 80s, we were as good a football team as there was in the National Football League. And unfortunately for us, we kind of ran into this team in our division called the Pittsburgh Steelers that may have had one of the great teams of all time in that era. But we held our own against them. We had the best record against the Steelers of anybody in the National Football League, in the 70s and 80s. And then we followed it right up with Boomer Esiason, who had great years. We go to another Super Bowl with him. I think the 90s probably hurt the perception of the Bengals. And I think, even today, Andy Dalton came in and took the team to the playoffs his first 5 years, but I don't think the Bengals ever got the respect around the league I think that we deserve. It is a good franchise. I'm excited, with Joe Burrow is coming there, and I've had a chance to chat with him a little bit on texting him, welcoming him to Cincinnati. But
so the clip, obviously you heard some of the names there. Andy Dalton's still there. This was again of July of 2020 when he came in here. Joe Burrow had just gotten drafted, but he was as gracious as he could be about that. He didn't blast Canton, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, its leadership, its voters, anything like that. And if anything, he was using that opportunity to promote other players, the greatness of the quarterback who replaced him at the end of his career. To me, we could talk about what the statistics, and I know our guy Jeff Hobson relayed the fact that he was the only remaining eligible quarterback to lead the league in passing 4 times and not be in the Hall of Fame. And there's all kinds of different things, completions and all kinds of different metrics. But to me, the guy that says a lot to me about that guy. And I thought about that clip today when I was so bummed to hear about that news with him. And I just said, I got to replay this clip, because he took that question that, maybe was a little uncomfortable. And I, apologize to him if it was. I didn't mean it that way. But he took that opportunity to talk about Ken Riley, to talk about Boomer Esiason, to talk about the team he was on that went up against the Steelers. And to me, that shows a lot of class. And that's who Ken Anderson is.
He even brought up Andy Dalton, who's never going to get
up Andy Dalton. You brought up Andy Dalton.
Yeah. I wonder, I don't want to speak for him, but that was 3 years ago, and it still hasn't happened. I don't know if he had any resentment, if it's grown, or if he's just kind of numb to it. I don't know, because we don't know for sure, what was going through Ken Riley's mind, and in the later part of his life about it. And as the years go on, it does become more and more pressing for the very obvious reason. So there's no easy answer, way to talk about this. We all know that he's deserving. It's just a matter of when the voters are going to decide to put him in, and they're running out of qualified senior candidates who are not named Ken Anderson at this point.
Yeah, I just my heart goes out to him. I know he still I laugh saying maybe his stance has changed on it, even if it has, or he's not the guy to say really a bad word about anybody. And so I unfortunately, it's going to take a little more time. I do think, as we said just a little bit ago, I think it's going to be now not so much an if, but a when. And hopefully that comes this next year. Again, I think that's a lame excuse if it is just because, we just put a senior Bengals guy in last year. We got to take a year off. If you want to put other people in because you find them more worthy, then do that. But make the voting process a little more clean if you're going to play politics in that way of, hey, we can't put another Bengals senior guy in back to back.
If we're just being straight honest. I think Ken Anderson's resume was, stronger than Ken Riley's, but I think we all kind of know why they put Ken Riley in, and it's because they screwed up not putting him in early. Like it's stupid, but I do believe that some of these reasons kind of get brought up, and you like to think that people who are in this position of power are more qualified and have more sound processes, but maybe they don't. I don't know. These guys are like 80 years old. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we can envision a time, hopefully, where, you see, if in your mind's eye there, you see an image of Munoz embracing Ken Anderson up on that stage. Hopefully Ken Riley's family as well would be there for something like that in the near future too, because we know that Ken Anderson is deserving, and hopefully Bengals fans and guys like Bengal Jim, who do the Jungle to the Hall event that is now an annual event, I know he's going to continue to pound the table, and the fans are behind him on that too. So that'll be part of it. There was a question about this from someone. I got to go back and look here. About Ken Anderson. Unfortunately, I can't find it. I'll have to kind of look for it. But I mean, I don't know, man. It just would have been a nice moment and a deserving moment, obviously, for Ken Anderson for the Bengals. I know what it was. There was a question in here. Maybe it was from Dan or Dan the Man or somebody in here. But basically, it said it was something to the effect of, do we know if the Bengals are doing much of anything to kind of promote this cause? Well, I know they work sort of probably handshake agreement stuff with Jim and the Jungle to the Hall stuff that he does. And then, of course, they put him in the Ring of Honor to help kind of propel him to more national prominence. So I think they're doing that. I don't know that they're going out there and pounding on Canton's doors to say, let this guy in. But I know they're trying to do their part to get Ken Anderson in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I would say because of that, they're doing more than the average team. Because I don't think most other teams feel the need to do all this extra effort because they don't feel like they're slighted by the NFL in that sense. It's just weird though, because when we talk about, why the Bengals didn't win a game or why they didn't win the playoffs, like there's typically new reasons for that every single year because every game is different. The voting process stays the same, and it's just like nothing's really changed. It's just it's not hard to talk about, but it's like there's only so much that you can say to explain and justify why something is and why something isn't, and the facts remain the same. Ken Anderson has a Hall of Fame worthy resume. It's become more known than just what Bengals fans know. It's been spread by national accounts and national reporters and national analysts. Like the word has gotten out about him, and he's gotten into the conversation in back-to-back years now. And like you said, it's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah. And I know a guy like Chris Collinsworth always, pounds the table for Ken Anderson, and hopefully a guy in his position with his prominence continues to do so. But let's drop the mic and get on out of here, John. A tiny bit abbreviated show, but we've covered a lot, and we've got more to cover later this week. So what do you got for us as we head on out of here?
Drop the mic is funny considering that's what Joe Mixon did to 4 reporters this week. Yeah, I thought about this, and I've taken more time to kind of marinate it. Paul Daniel Jr. brought up a good point. This probably happens more often, he knows that it happens more often than we think. It's just this specific time, it became a special circumstance considering the questions surrounding Mixon and why he went out of his way to kind of say, I'm not going to talk to you specific people because of what has happened to me this offseason and the way that the media has kind of put me into, how the media has covered what's happened to me. I thought it was weird. But again, I'm never going to judge a player for talking or not talking to the media. Like, they can do what they want. It's completely in their right. I just thought it was weird that if Joe Mixon had an issue with the way that certain media members were covering him, he's not going to make their jobs easier to cover him by not speaking to them, and they're going to have to get their information from a secondhand source. But it was good that he actually talked to other media members that literally a day afterwards, and that's good on him. Like, it's ultimately up to him to utilize the power that he has to, use the media members as a vehicle to get his voice out there and to do his part to control whatever narrative that he wants to control. So good on him for actually doing that. But my main thing, though, is that I resent and reject the idea that the reporters that he listed are no less qualified to cover the Bengals, are not doing their jobs in any specific way, are quote unquote ops, or people who have anti-Bengals agendas, or people who have anti-Joe Mixon agendas. Like, this is all ludicrous and ridiculous. And anyone who actually believes that any of these reporters have a specific vendetta or agenda against Joe Mixon to get him indicted or to get him cut is stupid, to be quite frank. So if that's you listening to this program, stop listening to this program. I'm just going to say it. Like, it pisses me off, honestly. So yeah, that's dumb, and stop believing that because it's not true.
Yeah, I don't find any, foundation of truth in that notion in terms of like, they've got it out for him or anything like that. But I think obviously it's a tough situation, and it's probably hard in general for Joe Mixon, even though it went a good way for him, for the team, for the fans. It went a good way. These legal issues went a good way for him in that he, avoided trouble, had the charges dropped, right? So, it's difficult probably for him to talk about. And so I guess there's a extra sensitivity there. And if somebody said something a certain way that he did not like, or, there was extra information put out there or something like that, he maybe took, I don't know if offense is the right word, whatever it is. He took offense, I guess, to that. And so I don't know. I hope that this ice kind of melts over time. All of those people do various good jobs covering the team. So, and Mixon has his feelings on the subject. We've also seen his agent have feelings on that subject as well. It reminded me a long time ago, a little bit, an experience that I had, and I've talked about it maybe once or twice on this show, but early when I was writing for Cincy Jungle, early on, I did an article on Cedric Benson, who had been at the time, I believe, I can't even remember. It was some issue where he was operating a boat, and there's some sort of issue with that. And I almost hesitate to talk about it now because at the time I had an attorney of his come straight at me and email me. He was very, very nice, but just kind of said, hey, there's some verbiage in here that isn't necessarily correct, and the situations you've laid out aren't totally factual. And I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of remedy that. And I was a little bit like, oh, wow, attorney. But also, I had the opportunity to do that. And, hopefully it smooths some things over. I never heard back negatively again. So I guess it did, but it just a smaller scale, but it reminded me of that a little bit in this situation. And hopefully, I guess my thing with it is I just hope that all parties can kind of over time, hopefully a successful season for Mixon individually and for the team kind of helps melt some of the ice there. And, and it sounds like he's going to, at least for now, address some of the media directly and field questions that way. But yeah, if people are telling you that they think that this was an intentional vendetta type of situation, is that what you're seeing on social media, John?
Yeah, more than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, I don't buy into that.
Yeah. I don't really have much more to say on it. And again, like, it's just, fans of all kinds are, they can be ridiculous at times. I know the majority of people don't believe that, but that's definitely what irked me the most, because like, the whole situation has been covered extremely fairly from all outlets. And again, if Mixon has issue with how certain people portrayed him, that's totally within his right. Absolutely. But again, the narrative that some people purposely went out of their way to make him look bad or did anything that was against the the standard of just basic journalistic integrity is ludicrous. It needs to be stopped.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get on out of here on that note. This has been a fun and emotion-filled show, but I like it. I like it because that means the regular season is around the corner. We're going to have a lot of other fun guests and different episodes for you to digest. So get it through your favorite audio streamer. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We appreciate all of the support. We will see you later this week. We're going to bring you some more stuff later this week. So check it out. Go to cincyjungle.com for all your news, opinions, analysis, podcasts, and everything. And also check out all the great stuff my guy John is doing it over at A to Z Sports. Appreciate you, John. We'll be talking soon, my friend.
Yep. See you guys later.